Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Cavoukian, and I'm delighted to be here with you today at the York Region Business Series. They're hosting this wonderful event called Let's Talk Big Data, Big Ideas, Big Opportunities. And the only thing missing in that is big privacy, and that's what I'm here to tell you about. So I'm going to tell you briefly, just give you a sort of the state of the art in terms of what is privacy, what's it all about, but more importantly, why should you care about it in a business context? Why should small and medium-sized businesses care about it? And I'll suggest to you that you have big reasons to care about it because it will give you a competitive business advantage. So let me start by just talking to you about privacy. What is it? You know, people often think privacy equals secrecy. They're wrong. Privacy doesn't equal secrecy. It's not about having something to hide. Far from it. Privacy is about control. Your ability to control who has access to your information. I always give it in the context of user control is absolutely critical. Privacy is predicated on freedom of choice. If you as the individual, what we call the data subject, the individual relating to the data, can control who has access to your data, you can choose to give it out widely if that is your choice. It's all about freedom of choice. And the Germans have a wonderful term called informational self-determination. It's all about the individual having the ability to determine the fate of his or her personal information. And context is absolutely critical to all of this because what one person's choice will differ dramatically from another person's choice, and that's because of the contextual nature of the information. Now, one more thing, since I've got you as a captive audience, I'm going to focus on very briefly is how absolutely vital privacy is to freedom. And people often don't make that link. They think, well, privacy has enormous value at a personal level as a human right, but what I want to impress upon you is that privacy has enormous value at a societal level. It is absolutely essential. I refer to it as a necessary condition for societal prosperity, well-being, and freedom. You cannot have innovation or creativity, the kind of prosperity that requires freedom in order to breed and grow and innovate. It's absolutely critical. And we know from historical academic examples that when freedom is removed, privacy was at the heart of how that started. So I just refer to Germany. And it's no accident that Germany is the leading data protection country in the world. It's no accident that they had to endure the abuses of the Third Reich and the complete cessation of all of their freedoms. And when that ended, they said never again. And they've gone to great lengths to protect privacy. In fact, the term informational self-determination was developed in Germany, and it was considered to be such an important right that it was built in as a constitutional right. It was embedded into their constitution in 1983. Now, surveillance is the antithesis of privacy. It's the exact opposite. And one of the negative consequences of surveillance is the complete removal of an individual's ability to think very broadly. I call it the usurping a person's limited cognitive bandwidth. I'm a psychologist, that's my academic training. And we know that when people think they're being watched all the time, it really limits their ability to develop freely and innovate. It's a remarkable factor. Now, tie this in with the recent revelations of Edward Snowden. Ever since Mr. Snowden's revelations, the distrust of the public has grown dramatically, not only of government, but also of the private sector. And I think that's why you have to be very, very tuned in to ensuring your customers that if you have their personal data, you're going to great lengths to protect it. And you will gain a competitive advantage by doing that. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, I'm going to tell you about a way that you can do this. Obviously, we have laws that need to be followed. The problem with laws, and when I say problem, I mean, believe me, I was a regulator for many, many years, and laws are essential to protecting privacy. But what they do is they allow a reactive system of if there's a privacy infraction, you take it to a privacy commissioner which I was for 17 years, and the commissioner will investigate, and then if they find there's been a breach of the act, they'll find in your favor and offer you some system of redress. All very important, but it's all after the fact. And we can no longer rely on exclusively on after-the-fact remedies. It's too little too late. In this world of ubiquitous computing, online connectivity, everybody being Wi-Fi connected, mobile devices, you need something that will ideally prevent the harm from arising. You need a proactive method of addressing the issue. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, privacy by design. This is something I developed many, many years ago in the late 90s, but it really took off a short while ago. In 2010, the International Assembly of Privacy Commissioners and Data Protection Authorities, we get together for a conference once a year. And in 2010, it was in Jerusalem, and we vote on resolutions that are advanced. And I advanced a resolution on privacy by design that it be considered as an international standard, a framework for how we do privacy. And to my surprise and delight, it was unanimously passed as an international framework for protecting privacy. And since then, it's been translated into 37 languages, which I think is a real testament to its success and global reach. Everyone is now doing some form of privacy by design, and the reason is simple. We have to find ways to prevent the privacy harms from arising, the privacy infractions, the data breaches. It's not enough anymore just to come in at the tail end and offer some system of redress, which is never sufficient. Let me tell you the essence of privacy by design. It's proactive, that's critical, embedded into the design of technology and business practices, operational processes, but in a way that allows multiple functionalities to operate in unison at the same time. That's the essence of it. It's not zero-sum. Zero-sum is the traditional, what I hope will be the dated view of looking at things. What zero-sum paradigms do is they say you can have an increase in one interest, say security, always at the cost of another interest, privacy, such that the two total to a sum of zero. In my world, that doesn't cut it, because invariably, it was never privacy that gained and security or some other interest lost. It was always the other. It's a win-lose proposition, an either-or, and that's unacceptable. So what privacy by design advances is positive sum. What positive sum means, simply, is you can have two positive increments in two functionalities at the same time. And it is such a better paradigm, because no one has to lose. Everyone gains. You basically get rid of the versus. It's not one interest versus another. You build on the power of and. You do privacy and security. You do privacy and business interests. And I'll give you examples of how we have done this in multiple areas. It is eminently doable. So I don't want you to think of this as some academic construct or theoretical framework. It's not. It's working on the ground now. And let me just give you an example of how heartening it is ever since we've introduced this. As I said, it's been translated into many languages. The Japanese were one of the initial countries that embraced privacy by design. And there's not a week that would go by that I wouldn't hear from some different jurisdiction about various successes they've had with it. And this is a quote that I captured in a letter that came to me a short while ago from Japan, the JIPDEC, the Japanese Information Processing Development Center. And it just blows me away, because they're talking about how important privacy by design is considered in Japan at JIPDEC. And they actually said that we need to insist on the principle of positive sum, not zero sum, and become enlightened with privacy by design. I mean, how awesome that the Japanese have embraced this notion of positive sum, where many here aren't familiar with it. So I'm hoping to show you that this is eminently doable and is being followed all around the world. Let me walk you through what is privacy by design. There are 7 what I call foundational principles. I've talked about the first one. We want to prevent the privacy harms from rising proactively, not just offer some system of redress after the fact. It's not reactive. Embedded in design is absolutely critical, because when I've talked to engineers and software designers, they've told me that if we get the instructions to embed this into the code, into the data architecture right at the outset, we can do it. It's a slam dunk. It's not hard to do. it becomes hard to do when we haven't done that. We've got the whole thing developed, the program's done, and then someone comes to us after the fact and says, oh yeah, bolt on some kind of privacy protections. Not going to happen. Certainly not going to be as effective as embedding it into the system. I skipped over privacy as the default setting, and that is absolutely critical. Let me explain. We know from the academic literature that whatever the default setting is, that is the condition that will prevail 80% of the time. It means if you do nothing as a user of a program, what is the default? What happens? I want it to be that you still get privacy. And companies that offer this to their customers really win because they can automatically offer privacy assurance without requiring the customer to go and find the privacy policy and read through usually a lot of legalese and find out, where they can opt out of something. It's much better to embed it as the default setting, and then you can tell all your customers, regardless of anything, any action having to be taken on your part, we give you privacy assurance. It's a great selling point. Full functionality I've talked about a lot, but it's essential that you follow this positive sum model. Don't settle for unnecessary trade-offs, which have been described to me as false dichotomies. Don't do it. You can offer both. Let me talk about security for a moment. The term privacy subsumes a much broader set of protections than security alone. But I assure you, if you don't have strong security, you're not going to have good privacy. Full stop. So you must have end-to-end security, full lifecycle protection from secure collection of the data to secure destruction of the data, and a finite point. You don't keep data forever. You identify when your use of the data terminates, and then you dispose of the data securely. Visibility and transparency is really open. You've got to be open with your customers. It's very important because increasingly people are asking what's happening with my information. Ever since Edward Snowden's revelations, much more conscious public. And people are saying, what are you doing with my information? And you have an obligation to tell them about your information practices. How long are you retaining it? What is your primary purpose for the data collection? Do you use it for any secondary uses? Do any unauthorized third parties ever have access to it? Hopefully never without your consent. These are the kinds of things you want to be very, very transparent and clear with your customers. And finally, respect for user privacy. This is so important. Keep it user-centric, meaning focused on the user. If you can alert the user, the data subject, your customer, how you're using their data, and make it really centered around the individual, you win. You just win big time because people are very, very tuned into this. And I mentioned that this isn't just a theoretical construct. Here's a paper I did when I was the former commissioner in 2012. And these are 9 different areas that we explain how we do privacy by design. Obviously, surveillance cameras. We did this in mass transit systems, very important to address these issues. Biometrics, absolutely critical. Smart meters, the smart grid, which is growing by leaps and bounds. Mobile communications, that's everywhere. Everyone has a mobile device now. It's increasingly important. Near-field communications, RFIDs and sensors, increasingly the Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communications, absolutely critical. Just a beginning, growing field that will demand that privacy be embedded into the design, because if it's not embedded in design, you're not going to get any access to it because it's machine-to-machine. You're not going to be a part of it. So we have to focus on this. And then, geolocation data, home health care with the demographics of an elderly population. You have to address how can we deliver health care to individuals within their home, but also preserve their privacy. It's absolutely doable. We did a great paper with Intel on that. And then big data and data analytics. I'll be talking to you more about that in just a moment. And I've done a number of papers on big data when I was the commissioner. And if you go to privacybydesign.ca, the website of the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, a lot of these papers you will find displayed, and it's in lots of different areas. We've partnered with different companies. We've partnered with IBM and Deloitte, and you'll see a whole range of examples. And I think The reason I want to point you to that is I want to show you how eminently doable this is. This isn't just about the thoughts of a former commissioner. It's about companies who partnered with us because they understood the value of embedding privacy into big data analytics. 90% of all data was created in the last 2 years, and this will just accelerate. The value of big data is enormous. We are going to have so many opportunities. We'll gain very valuable insights through the new predictive modes of data analytics that are arising. Think of the healthcare field. We'll just have so many discoveries and wonderful opportunities. So that's the plus side. But I always want to remind people there's always another side if you don't embed privacy into design, and that's the potential for expanded surveillance, increasing the risk of unauthorized use and disclosure on just a massive scale that was previously, just unimaginable. That's the concern. That's what we've also learned from Edward Snowden. The massive scale of surveillance is already taking place on the part of our governments. And we have to constantly be reminded of that because big data is going to be exploding. Some people, IDC Research said that they expect the big data markets to be worth roughly $28 billion in 2 years' time, 6 times faster than the growth of the entire IT market. Now, we'll see if this actually happens. There are a lot of predictions made that don't reach fruition. But I want to infuse some reality into these wonderful predictions, because whenever there's a new anything, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of hype. So I always say, first comes the honeymoon. Everything is great. We love big data. It's going to rule the world. Everything else steps aside. Forget about privacy. Okay, so we might lose some privacy, but so what? We're getting all these excellent returns. And forget about causality. All we're going to care about is correlation. Well, what invariably happens, unfortunately, is the honeymoon ends. And that's the problem. You get all this hype that probably could never be matched anyway because it's just over the moon. And then you get these kind of comments. All of a sudden, people are saying, wait a minute, big data technology is not really foolproof. And they say that despite all of the massive interest that's taken place in it, that many programs still sputter or fail completely. And this is after enormous resources have been devoted to this. So this is really bad. A lot of money is being poured into this area. Here's another quote. Big data is moving from its inflated expectation phase, the honeymoon, to a trough of disillusionment. Not good. That's the stage we're at now. And both extremes are too far on the extreme category. But just one more, forget big data. What is needed is good data. And I think what this simply means is we need quality data. It's not just the massive size of the data analytics. It's got to be valuable in terms of information. And in order to have valuable information, what you must have context. Context is absolutely critical. And if you perform data analytics on context-free data, it will yield correlations, and sometimes the correlations will be valuable, other times they'll be spurious. By adding context as a feature into the data analytics, we may be able to impute some level of causality. And this will have the potential just to be invaluable in terms of the quality of the analysis taking place. So just consider some of this. And I want to just also counteract some other views I often encounter, often in the big data world. Big data stifles innovation, stifles in creativity. That is such utter nonsense. The exact opposite is true. Privacy drives innovation because you've got to be really creative to do a positive sum approach, to have big data and privacy, to have Internet of Things and privacy embedded into it. It's a harder proposition, there's no question. But we can do it. I've spoken to engineers all around the world asking them if they can do this, and the response has always been, of course we can do this. You know, we're smart, and I love that. They're so confident. But the initial essential is that they have to be advised of the desire to do this when they get the instructions to write the code for the program, or create the business practice that's being contemplated or whatever. They need to know from the outset. And when you give it to them at that stage, they can absolutely do it. It will drive innovation. You will come up with the most creative solutions where you can have both functionalities. But we need a new playbook on how to do this. And that's why I've worked extensively with engineers and software designers. A couple of examples. So we had been working with the Internet Engineering Task Force, and they've embraced privacy by design. And we're working with them. They're investigating, how to embed privacy into the design of their protocols and architectural designs in a way that is steady and systematic and convey this information to their engineers. About a month ago, I spoke at an IEEE conference, International Association of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, in the UK, in London. And they wanted me to talk about the privacy-related issues because at Ryerson, the Privacy and Big Data Institute, we're the only big data institute to brand itself with privacy. And so people are intrigued. How do you do privacy and big data? I loved it. It just attracts so much interest and offers of collaboration. So it can be done. We just have to talk to the people in the field and do this properly. And that's another thing we've been doing through OASIS. I co-chair a technical committee with Professor Don Jutla, and it's called the Privacy by Design for Software Engineers Technical Committee of OASIS, and it is specifically to provide some governance and privacy by design and documentation for software engineers, coders, so that they'll know how to do this. We want to write the playbook for privacy by design in a way that is accessible. And that's what we've just also done. In June of this year, we developed a version 1.0 of the PBD documentation for software engineers. And we're just working on getting that to the next stage now. And I think this will be completed soon and available for public review. And I urge you, if you know engineers or software designers, to have a look at this. Because I keep saying, you've got to embed it in design. And recently, the Chief Privacy Officer, Scott Shipman, he said the same thing. He said it's all about design. Rather than develop a policy, which you should also do, develop a technology that will work according to how it's designed. Think in terms of design. It's absolutely critical. So I mentioned we've done a number of papers. Here are a few of them. I worked with Jeff Jonas at IBM, brilliant big data architect. And we've also worked with the Respect network. You can take a look at these. We've also worked with Intel, and I have the greatest respect. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Deloitte, of course. This paper, I think, is really good. We just completed it about a month or two ago. Actually, it's more than that. I can't believe how quickly time flies. And Deloitte really grasps the need for embedding privacy as a design feature. And they live this and they breathe it out to all their clients, which makes it very exciting. And one more comment, David Hoffman, the head of security and privacy at Intel, he talks about Intel believes that privacy is foundational for the use of big data. And I love that. If someone at the head of privacy and security at Intel says privacy is foundational to big data, you know it's being treated seriously. And this is a major company. But what I always tell people, businesses, is treat privacy as a business issue. If you think of it as a business issue instead of a regulatory compliance issue, you're going to gain enormously because you're going to think strategically and you will thereby transform privacy into a competitive business advantage, one that is sustainable over time. And you can do this. I've seen this happen again and again. Let me talk about data breaches just for a moment. People are saying, is there an epidemic of data breaches? There are so many data breaches that are happening, and here are just a few of them. It seems like every day there's a new massive data breach. Everyone knows about Target a few years ago, Home Depot recently, Neiman Marcus, JP Morgan Chase, like this huge bank in the US. It's just staggering to think that all of these amazing companies who should have, you would think, enormous security strength and privacy protection, they're not immune by any means. So I always tell people to look at trends and challenges, and what's at the heart of it. Poor information management practices, largely speaking, are at the heart of it. The majority of privacy breaches occur because of these poor information practices by organizations, not individuals. Obviously, individuals form the organization, but it is so important that we focus on the practices of organizations, and small and mid-sized organizations, absolutely critical. I always ask if, whenever I go into a small company, do you have a data map? And usually I get this blank stare. And by that I mean, this isn't complicated. Where is personally identifiable data walking into your operation? At what level? For what purpose? Through what collection means? How are you retaining that personal data? Are you keeping it in identifiable form? Perhaps you have the foresight to encrypt the data and then use it in encrypted form, which minimizes the privacy risk dramatically. But maybe you don't have the means to do that. But these are the questions you have to address. And if you have a data map, it will show you how the personal data flows throughout your organization, who has access to it, what purposes is it being used for. Ideally, you should only use personal information for the purpose for which it was collected, that you've identified to the data subjects, and then don't use the information for any secondary uses without the consent of the data subject. These are the issues you have to address through a privacy policy, of course, and having a data map will really help you with that. You can also use privacy impact assessments, of course, but I'm going to suggest to you that if you embed privacy as a design feature by design, you will get a foot ahead on all of this, because the essence of privacy by design is that privacy is baked into everything that you do. Now, let me also tell you, you're saying, well, isn't this going to cost me to do all this? Of course, there's a cost associated with it. But I assure you, the cost is a fraction of the cost you will have to endure if you have a data breach, if you have a privacy infraction. I guarantee it. So I always show this slide to people. Here's the proactive cost, this little bundle here. Here's the enormous cost once you've had a privacy breach. So first of all, people don't only pursue lawsuits against companies. They're class action lawsuits now. Everyone jumps into it. But even more important to a company, and what you must avoid, is damage to your brand, damage to your reputation. It's critical. The loss of consumer confidence and trust, absolutely critical. All of this is huge. And you may not be able to recoup the costs of that. Look at Target now. The president of Target in the US, the CEO of Target in the US resigned. The president of Target Canada was fired. In the last quarter, the fourth quarter, the sales dropped by 46% compared to the same quarter the previous year. So Target lost 46% of their sales compared to the previous quarter, the year before. I mean, it's staggering. You don't want to do that. You want to preserve your brand, your reputation, and your customers. And you could do that by following privacy by design. Now, there's also a number of things you can do in terms of the uses of data. If you want to use data that you've collected for one purpose, then you want to use it for another purpose, for research, for data analytics, you can do that. But you have to first de-identify the data. And you have to do it strongly. There are strong de-identification protocols developed by Professor Khaled El-Imam, world-renowned expert on de-identification. And we're going to be holding a symposium next week on October 21st at Ryerson University. It's going to be webcast. So if you go to our website, you can see, if you want to follow the day's events, we're going to have excellent speakers there. I just want to, I'm almost getting to the end. Once again, I want to return to the flawed view, terribly flawed view, that privacy stifles innovation. It doesn't. It does the exact opposite. Big data and privacy are not mutually exclusive, and I want to drive that home, because people say to me, well, how can you head up a big data institute? And I say, because we're embedding privacy into all that we do. And that's what I want you to know, that at Ryerson, we value privacy and big data. You can do both. It takes a lot of innovation and creativity, and that's what we hope to develop here. We want to drive innovation. You can have multiple functionalities at the same time. I hope I can just leave you with that message that privacy and fill in the blank can coexist at the same time and both increase. Positive sum. I want you to remember that term. Now let me leave you with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the World Wide Web. He recently said that, look, people need to reclaim ownership of their data and start putting it to good use. He said he would like to build a world in which I have control of my data. It's people want control of their data. And when you have the likes of Sir Tim Berners-Lee saying this, for sure this is going to grow. And this is someone who invented the web. He knows what he's talking about. You can do this. At a business level, what you need to do is preserve the trust and the confidence of your customers. And this is a well-known quote. It takes years to build trust, but seconds to destroy it, and hopefully not forever to repair it. So don't put yourself in a situation where you have to try to repair trust because you've lost it, because you didn't take the necessary time at the front end to build in privacy into your big data analytics or whatever you're doing at your company. It is eminently doable, and I just urge you to do it now, because as a small or medium-sized business, do yourself a favor. Avoid costly data breaches, privacy infractions, and give yourself a leg up over the other guys. Gain a competitive advantage that is sustainable over time. You can do this. So let me end, ladies and gentlemen, by just saying that privacy risks are best managed proactively by embedding privacy by design and preventing the harm from arising. If you focus on prevention, I mean, think of a medical model. Can you imagine going to your doctor and they say, yeah, you've got cancer, we're just going to see how it develops, and then we'll offer you some chemo after the fact? I mean, what an unthinkable proposition. That's why I want you to think of privacy infractions and data breaches. Don't let them develop. Prevent them from happening, and save yourself a boatload of trouble and cost in the process. Get rid of zero-sum thinking. Embrace doubly enabling systems. You can have both. You can have big data and what I call big privacy. I want you to have both. And if you don't get smart and lead with privacy by design, then as one of my German colleagues, Kai Rannenberg, says, you're going to really take a chance. You're either going to get privacy by chance or worse, privacy by disaster. It's going to come back to haunt you. So don't put yourself in that position. Embrace privacy by design, build it in, give your customers privacy assurance, and watch your business thrive. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.